So, throughout your illness, before you got on soup, you were majority of the time on a vegan or vegetarian diet. It didn't work for you. But what I'm curious about, it seems like there's these two different camps when it comes to healing. People that swear by a plant-based diet or going to more of a carnivore diet. So when you're working with people, do you ever see plants working? And if so, in what cases?
I do, but I don't teach plant-based diets anymore. I did early on in my career for certain conditions. Like I would do Gerson's as an option for cancer. I gave people 3 options and they could choose. Uh, but really, you and I could have the exact same illness and we could need very different protocols to get out of that. The plant-based approach is much better than the American diet right now. And so anytime you clean up a diet, there's a subset of people that are going to improve. With that, there's also a subset of knowledge. So you have different levels of knowledge in the nutritional and in the health world, and they're pretty bottomless. I mean, it could just keep going and going. But you'll have a subset of people that really like promote something like the plant-based life, often because they went into remission with that, right? And so they've got the religious fervor, and that's great. Like whatever gets you there, gets you there. That's great. The problem is that it's very much pushed on the public. So I think if the plant narrative wasn't pushed on the public so much around the world, really around the world, it wouldn't be so devastating. But the reality is it's not a solution for most, and it's not a permanent solution. So if you take the example of, I don't remember what it was called, but the man who did the documentary on the juice cleanse and he lost all that weight and he went all around the country.
Yes,
You
Joe
remember that one?
Cross.
Yes, thank
I
you.
forget the name of the movie, but
Thank
he's been
you.
on the show way back in the day.
That's great. So that was amazing for him. And then a year later, it came back, right? His illness came back. And so what we're lacking is really a good public understanding and medical understanding of what certain foods do when. Plants, aside from the ones I mentioned that are very high in toxins, their act on the body is optional. We can have carbohydrates, we cannot. We can be very healthy on carbohydrates, we can be very healthy without them. They're not essential, but they can be useful. And they can be more useful in conditions that have a hormonal component. So sometimes with thyroid conditions or sex hormones, anything that's going to help bring fat-soluble toxins out through the liver, because some of those foods have soluble fiber, which binds to those fatty issues. And so it can pull it out and rid the body of the burden. But ultimately, what it is a detox. It's not a rebuild. So there are stages of the illness. Like maybe if I had gotten at my illness early enough, and there's certainly other illnesses that are more an issue of toxins, right? External toxins that have come in. And for that, if you do a lot of plants, that can be facilitated out. Now, if that's just a surface level issue and not the core, it'll come back like it did for that man, right? And so the problem with that is that you can't stay on a juice cleanse. You can't stay on a vegan diet, not lifelong, and be properly healthy. We can pretend that we're not part of nature all we want, but that is not a human or a mammalian diet. We don't have the digestion, the bacteria, any of that. So we can get on for a while and we can feel really good on it. But what I like to remind people is that most people know someone who's alcoholic, right? And if you know someone who's alcoholic, they'll swear that they feel better if they have a drink in the morning. And they're not being dishonest. That's very true. When we are used to a high toxin load and we bring more of that in, we can feel better. We see that with oxalates. If someone is used to eating spinach salads every day, we put them on carnivore, they will crumble very quickly. If you give them oxalates, it relieves them. Right? And so a lot of what we do, what makes us feel better, what perceptively feels better, is not actually what gets us to the goal line. The goal, in my mind, and maybe everyone has a different goal, but for me, when I worked with people and when I worked with myself, I didn't want to be on something for the rest of my life. I would do it. I would have done anything. But ideally, a real sign of health is having resilience and flexibility, and not having to be rigid. And so you are disciplined for the period that your body needs. But then if you can't ever break out of that, then something's not right, right? And that may be 5 years. I don't mean it in 6 months. I mean, like, you may need a lot of time on whatever that is. But if you never break out, or if you do, it comes back, that is saying something. It's more of a medication approach to the illness as opposed to getting at the root, right? And so most of the things that I see are things that need a rebuild, not a detox. Detox is always part of it, but our body is great at detoxing. We have all these detoxing organs, so you can give it a help, and sometimes it really does need it, but it does have that. What it often needs is rebuilding, and to rebuild the tissue, to rebuild a cell, the nervous system, immune system, those need fat and protein. And there's nothing better than saturated fat for rebuilding that. So if you go the strategy route, you'd go that way more. But I honestly, I mean, to be perfectly honest, I would teach whatever worked. I mean, all that matters is that people get better, right? And so, like I mentioned in the beginning about cancer, I used to let people choose because the Gerson diet is plant-based, and it's, aside from the liver, and it's very intensive, right? You have like 10 coffee enemas a day and all these juices. It's a lot of work. But some people prefer plants. And so I would let them do that over, say, ketosis or one of the other methods. But the success rate wasn't the same, not even close. And part of that could have been to compliance, right? So take that with a grain of salt. But after a few years, I just didn't even feel right allowing it or recommending it.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
What the Blue Zone is selling fits with the narrative of what we've heard really since the food pyramid, and promotes that further. We tend to be like, okay, I'm going to have this organ and nothing else. That's not the ancestral way. The ancestral way would be